This is it. This is the end of the line before Endwalker. As of now, there are less than 30 days left before Endwalker's release. I feel like I've had enough time and seen enough to be able to give an honest and complete review of it. With that said, this video isn't a review. I'm not a journalist. I'm just a knucklehead with a computer and an internet connection and an opinion. So everything here is purely opinion based and should be taken with a grain of salt, as with anything else on the internet. Additionally, there will be spoilers throughout the video. So as I usually say, if you care about spoilers and haven't completed Shadowbringers, please turn away now. Anyway, you came here to hear my thoughts on Shadowbringers, and some of you have subscribed to my channel for a while now and have been waiting for it, so let's just get started. Final Fantasy XIV has been an adventure. I'm sure I've said this before, so many of you may know that I have played Final Fantasy XIV since A Realm Reborn's launch, although not consistently and never seriously. My initial reaction to the game was that I enjoy the story, but there are far too many side quests that need to be done in order to progress. I felt like it was too grindy for a game that I treated as a side game when I was playing WoW primarily, so I rarely ever made it past getting my first chocobo. Obviously, over the years, the team has taken a very active approach at updating and improving the overall experience, and now you can basically go from the MSQ quest to the next MSQ quest without the need to do any of the side quests, and it feels great, especially considering for many the story is the big draw and others may be drawn more to the other XP gains instead, but the story is literally what everybody focuses on when they talk about this game. Additionally, having flying available to you now to finish up the post 2.0 MSQ is a huge improvement, and it saves you so much time getting from point A to B. Heavensward was definitely a great expansion. It showed that the dev team had matured in such a way that shows that they knew what strengths the game had and where they could improve. The story became more focused, and the game also started to toy with some more engaging and interesting encounter concepts within the dungeons and the raids. Stormblood's story felt like a mixed bag, being too slow in moments to get to the really good stuff, but its dungeons and large group content was very top tier and enjoyable. There's still a lot of content I look forward to jumping into very soon across the expansions, and I've heard nothing but great things about content such as Uru, despite the cringe nickname given by the community. And so now we arrive at our destination. The post-Stormblood story sets our tone very well. A story of loss and the fear of the unknown. When you first step into Norvrant and you're presented with a world that you are unprepared for, there's no expectations set or goal in mind aside from saving your friends. This is an entirely new adventure and felt like you're stepping into a new Final Fantasy game, just like every other Final Fantasy game before it. The stories are all mostly disconnected. From the very start, you can learn how dark the story will be, despite the bright sky. The very first person you meet ends up dead, and the inhabitants of the worlds are kind of resigned to their fate, living in basic ruins of what they previously were, and only a handful of relatively safe harbors existed, such as the Crystarium and Ulmor. Shortly after arriving, you're greeted by a familiar face, although throughout the expansion the game treats you as if you don't know who they are. So once the reveal comes, it's like, yeah, I know who this was the entire time. Yeah, you guys act like it was a surprise. But yes, from the very moment I met the Crystal Exarch, I knew it was Grahatia, and I'm sure most folks did. Especially the folks who may have completed the Crystal Tower series of quests just before starting Shadowbringers. But anyway, this familiar face brings us to Norvrant's version of the Crystal Tower, which is technically our Crystal Tower too, but from the future and brought to Norvrant through Grahatia's world-hopping magic. So it's like basically it was from the future, brought back to present times in a different world. It's weird how this all works. But It's there where our adventure is laid out before us. Objective 1, reuniting with our friends. Objective 2, free the inhabitants from the Sin Eaters and the flood that causes the permanent daylight across Norvrant. And Objective 3, get you and your friends back home in one piece. And then go have a pint at the Winchester. From the start, Shadowbringers brings with it a very familiar formula found in Final Fantasy games. You are an adventurer in a strange land that must visit key locations around the world to gain power and end the threat to the world, all while evading and thwarting an evil villain who makes their presence felt throughout the story. One could argue that the previous expansions did the exact same thing, but Shadowbringers did so in such a way that invoked nostalgia, and it kind of hit all the right notes on the way. Each time you met up with one of your friends, it felt like JRPGs of old, where your party was increasing in size. Each zone having its own set of troubles, had its own big bad enemy that ended in a drastic change for the region upon defeat. In this case, the Light Wardens you defeat in the region to bring back darkness to the region. And just as you think you've come to the end of your journey, a new problem arises. For example, infiltrating Yulmore at the end and finding that Va3 fled to Mount Golg while you're fighting his army, and then he essentially levitates the mountain and commands his army of Sin Eaters to swarm the skies, preventing an easy method of reaching him. And then when you defeat Va3, you find that an even worse enemy is behind everything. They undo all of your work, and you have to work to defeat him or risk the end of days. Although, if I'm being entirely honest, I think we all knew M itself was up to something sinister from the beginning. And what ultimately becomes the deciding factor? Teamwork. Grahatia basically uses his world-jumping spells and summons an entire raid group to join in on the final encounter with him itself. Using the combined power of teamwork and the collected light power that you absorbed from killing the Light Wardens, you defeat him itself, who has revealed himself to be Hades. And it was such an awesome battle. Every bit of the story for Shadowbringers seems to be very well paced. The story never felt like it was lingering for too long. The slower moments were used to tell the story of the world around you, just as previous expansions. And it just kind of lets you know why you were there. For example, when you seek out Alizé for the first time, you visit an inn, which is basically little more than a shelter built between large rocks in the field. At the inn, you're informed that there are people there that are being treated, and just basically being cared for while they kind of await their ultimate fate, because they were infected by Sin Eaters, which basically means they're eventually going to turn and then have to be dealt with. You're sent to handle a few tasks related to the inn prior to locating Alizé, but the story is told in such a compelling way that it doesn't really feel like the story is slowed down at all. In fact, you only do like 1 or 2 quests, I believe, before you actually meet Alizé. So a lot of the plot points that you hit there go a lot faster than previous expansions, such as Stormblood. The story itself is a much darker tone to it, however, and that isn't to say there isn't humor spread throughout. For example, there's moments where Alphinaud is being completely awkward, and the game really focuses on that out of pure humor. And then, of course, there's a moment at the very end of, the 5.0 content where it's basically Yuri Anjar washed up on a shore, and he's still totally passed out, but the rest of the party they're basically celebrating their victory while he's just laying on the shore. It's really funny. But yeah, there's plenty of moments that'll kind of lighten the mood slightly so that you aren't totally bombarded with bleak moments one after the other. But when the story does take a dark turn, the story really does lean into it. There are moments spread throughout the expansion that add horror elements to the story. The first moment came at the hands of a powerful Sin Eater, turning Alizé's good friend Tesleen into a Sin Eater. The visual of her face, eyes wide, mouth agape, and her flesh turning into porcelain, kind of gave me vibes of The Ring, and it really did send shivers down my spine at that moment while I was staring at the screen. After facing Hades and bringing peace and darkness back to Norvrant, the Warrior of Light must return to his final task of returning his friends back home. This is not without its issues, however. During your time trying to find a suitable method, you find that at home, on the source, Gaius's adopted children have taken active roles in developing and testing new weapon prototypes. These weapons are heavily based off of the weapons you fight in Final Fantasy VII. It's no brainer that the devs needed to do the weapons justice in order to please fans of the series, and I believe they did just that. There's a moment where you face off against Sapphire weapon, and you're put into a weapon of your own, making the battle essentially something out of Gundam or Evangelion. Back at Norvrant, the heroes decide that they want to honor the memories of the original Warriors of Light on the first, and they decide to spread the word of their deeds and how they were deceived. As the heroes began spreading the word, Ardbert shows up, however, and uses this opportunity to encourage the citizens all around Norvrant to drop what they're doing and become Warriors of Light themselves. It is discovered that Elidibus is actually in control of Ardbert's lifeless body, and leads the heroes facing off against him in the Crystal Tower, in the form of the very first Warrior of Light. Unfortunately, all of the Aether used over the years had taken its toll on G'rahatia, who over the course of the story had crystal forming all throughout his body. Having expended a great amount of Aether to protect his allies and defeat Elidibus, his transformation into crystal was complete, trapping him in the tower. However, before these events, he was able to contain his soul into one of the vessels created to transport your friends back home. Back on the source, the heroes were revived thanks to the vessels created, and you are successful in merging G'rahatia's present self with his future soul and the memories he had throughout the years. Using these same techniques, the heroes choose to summon familiars that will aid the people who are under the influence of primals by restoring them from their enthrallment. Unfortunately for our heroes, their work is never done, and they are now faced with a new threat in the return of Xenos and his Ashian lackey, who attempt to bring about a new end of days. This arc brings our heroes to Pagelthen, where we face off against Lunar Bahamut. In the end, our heroes decide they're going to demand the aid of the Charlayans, and this is where the expansion leaves off. So up to this point, I focused primarily on what happened in the story. If you couldn't tell, I absolutely loved the story and felt it was the strongest element to the expansion by far. This doesn't take away from anything else in this case, however. I feel like telling you that the dungeons, trials, and raids being amazing is obvious, but I need to say it. Obviously the nostalgia content is wonderful, but the original content stands out and is amazingly done. From the MSQ trials to the Castrum Lacus Latore, which I'm probably saying wrong, this content is amazing. Castrum Lacus Latore is basically an alliance raid built within the Bajan Southern Front. It gives an open world raid encounter vibe, despite the fact Baja is an instance location itself. When enough skirmishes and critical engagements are completed in Baja and enough people who have unlocked the Castrum are in the region, the Castrum becomes available for you to sign up for. Upon entering, you and 24 other players must coordinate groups to engage bosses and free captives within the Castrum. The bosses can be punishing in your first few attempts, as most critical engagements tend to be in Baja, but completing it is way beyond rewarding. The music in game has always been beautifully done and full of character, but Shadowbringers brings with it some of my favorite music in the game. From Amarang to Pagelthen, which I mentioned earlier, we're talking about music that sounds so awesome that it gets stuck in your head for hours. As someone who loves heavy metal, there's a lot of music in this game that really vibes with me, and things like the powerful riffs and Hades theme hit the spot, which is actually a good thing considering you'll likely hear that song in particular on repeat at some points while waiting on the full party to form for the epic final encounter. To summarize my thoughts here, Shadowbringers is full of content that should please anybody who loves MMOs and who may also love classic Final Fantasy games. It hits all the right notes from the beginning to the end and absolutely leaves you excited for Endwalker to get here so we can get more of that. When I quit World of Warcraft, I did so truly believing that I likely would never love an MMO again. Over the years, MMOs have come and gone, many trying to take concepts from WoW and either copying it outright or set out with the goal of being the next WoW killer. WildStar being an example. RIP WildStar. I loved that game, would love to see it return. I still stand by the fact that the only thing that will kill WoW is WoW itself, however, but I was just so done with that genre. I was ready to quit streaming and YouTube content creation altogether, but over the last few months before I quit WoW, I had been slowly returning to Final Fantasy XIV, especially after finding a free company through different Twitter circles. That's how I found out about my free company. On a whim, I created a character and applied to the free company, and after being accepted, I quickly realized that I found my new home in the game. Shout out to Misunderstood on Gilgamesh. Unlike other free companies, there was always someone online, so when the day came that I thought I was done with MMOs, I logged into Final Fantasy XIV and made the decision that I would focus primarily on it. After a week or so, I made my first video explaining that I was done with WoW. It was like my big breakup letter, if you will. I still wasn't sure if Final Fantasy XIV was going to be the game for me in the end, but I had a new adventure to take on and a new goal in mind. I intended on completing all of the content that I can and make these videos giving my thoughts. I never intended on gaining traction or a following out of them. Most people are more interested in what Asmongold and Rich have to say, not some 35-year-old with barely 275 subscribers. For me, the videos were more about me using my voice to share something I enjoy with my friends and hopefully brush up a bit more on my editing skills. Up until the end of Stormblood, I still felt like I wasn't sure if I would stick with Final Fantasy XIV when I reached the end of my journey. Of course, some of my frustrations also came from some minor backseating while I was streaming, and the big streamer dramas that were going on had made me annoyed with some of the members of the community. So I made the decision to stop streaming my progress and direct my focus on completing the video guides that I'd made previously, kind of as a way of still releasing content for the channel until I could get this video up. The moment I entered Norvrant, however, things started to shift for me. I began to feel like I was playing a game that I would have played on my SNES as a child. I had nostalgic moments that made me think of my mom, who unfortunately tragically passed away in October of 2019. In fact, as recording this video, I'm recording it on the second anniversary of her passing. Anyway, moving on. The story kind of moved me in ways that no MMO has ever done. I actually began to fall in love with MMOs again, more specifically Final Fantasy XIV. I don't think I've ever had a game impact me this way. It's safe to say that I'm a fan. So I guess this brings me to the end of the journey. This journey's had its share of pain and drama, as well as a ton of great moments and victories, but now it's basically time for me to rest. I'll be preparing for my next journey, and this time I'll be making the journey with you and with all of my new friends. I've pre-ordered Endwalker and intend on putting a stop to Xenos once and for all. So for now, I say thank you to everyone who has followed my journey thus far, and a very special thank you for those who have subscribed to my channel throughout the months. At this point, I'm very close to reaching partner status on YouTube again, which is something that I didn't think would ever happen. So, for now, let me reintroduce myself. My name is Sir Onion Knight. I'm an opinionated asshole from Texas. I do art and make video games sometimes. I also enjoy streaming. However, crushing anxiety and a lack of sleep prevents that from being a regular thing. But I would very much like to get back into it soon. I hope you will join me on my next journey. I do plan to make more videos between now and then, and have ideas bouncing around in my head that I need to flesh out. And now that I've finally finished this video, I think I can actually do that. So yeah, that's about it for now. I hope you've enjoyed this video as I've gone through script after script after script, and nothing seems to do this game justice at this point. Thank you guys for sticking around, I just want to throw this out there that if I reach 1,000 subscribers on YouTube before Endwalker's release, I will Fantasia my character into a male Vieira for at least 6 months as punishment, and I will eat a 1-chip challenge chip live on stream. So if you want to see me suffer, share my videos with your free companies and your friends. Until next time, I'll see you guys around, and I'll see you guys in the next video.